Commander Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the landing platform, staring at the horizon. The planet of Aloria stretched endlessly before him, lush forests with shimmering leaves, floating rivers that glowed softly, and mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Humans had traveled far to reach this distant world, but nothing in the reports had prepared him for the beauty of it in person. "Sir, sensors show the Alorian court is ready," said Lieutenant Mira, stepping beside him. Her voice carried the usual mix of professionalism and awe. She had been with Ethan on many missions, but even she couldn't hide her amazement at the alien world. Ethan took a deep breath and nodded. "Let's meet their queen," he said, trying to sound calm. Inside, however, he felt his heart race. The stories about Queen Lyra, wise, graceful, radiant, had made her seem almost unreal. Now he would see her in person. The landing craft descended slowly. Its smooth silver hull reflected the glowing rivers below. Around them, Alorian attendants in flowing robes moved gracefully, their eyes wide with curiosity at the human visitors. Their skin shimmered faintly, as if the sunlight had touched them in a magical way. Ethan couldn't help but admire the harmony of their appearance and movements. As the ramp touched the ground, Ethan led his team forward. The air was crisp and clean, carrying a subtle fragrance he couldn't identify. Birds, or something like birds, fluttered past, their colors vibrant beyond anything on Earth. Every step he took made him feel smaller, almost fragile in the presence of this strange and wonderful world. Finally, they reached a grand hall made of crystalline walls that reflected every color of the landscape outside. And there she was. Queen Lyra stood in the center, taller than any human he had seen, with hair that seemed like flowing silver light and eyes that glimmered like stars. Her presence was calm, yet commanding, and yet there was a softness, a gentleness, in the way she regarded him. Ethan swallowed hard. He had trained for diplomacy, for emergencies, for interstellar conflicts, but no training prepared him for the overwhelming moment of seeing someone so beautiful. Words failed him. His tongue felt heavy, as if the air itself had thickened. Lieutenant Mira nudged him lightly. "Sir, you might want to speak," she whispered. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it again, and then tried once more. Nothing came out. The silence stretched. The Alorians, used to calm and precise communication, tilted their heads slightly, watching, the humans with curiosity. Queen Lyra raised an eyebrow, her lips curving in a faint, almost amused smile. "You humans are different," she said, her voice melodic and gentle. "Why do you not speak?" Ethan finally found a word. He stopped. I mean, his cheeks warmed, and he looked down at his boots. "Nothing," the court exchanged whispers. Some of the attendants leaned closer to each other, their expressions a mix of surprise and curiosity. No human had ever struggled to speak in front of them like this. Finally, Mira stepped forward smoothly. "Your Majesty, Commander Cross is overwhelmed by your presence," she said, translating as diplomatically as she could. Lyra tilted her head, her glowing eyes softening. "Overwhelmed? By me?" she asked, a small laugh escaping her. It was musical, like a gentle wind over glass. "That is unusual, but honesty is welcome." Ethan felt his heartbeat thunder in his chest. He had wanted to compliment her, to say something that could bridge the gap between human and alien, but his words had fled. He bowed slightly, hoping his gesture would convey respect where speech had failed. The Queen's blush was almost imperceptible, but to Ethan, it was enough. He noticed it instantly and felt a strange warmth spread through him. Here was someone, so magnificent that even she could feel shy, and that made her seem human, in a way. Lyra's attendants adjusted their robes and began explaining the next steps of the meeting. Ethan struggled to follow along, partly because of the translation device and partly because his mind was still caught up in the Queen's presence. He realized that first impressions were more powerful than any training. They moved to a circular chamber filled with floating lights that hovered like tiny stars. The humans took their seats, trying to maintain composure while Lyra sat on a raised platform, her posture graceful and natural. She studied each human carefully, her gaze lingering on Ethan longer than the others. "So," Lyra said after a moment, "tell me why humans have come to Aloria. What is your purpose?" Ethan cleared his throat. He wanted to sound confident. He wanted to be the commander, the diplomat, the hero, but he still felt awed. We come in peace," he said, finally finding his voice. "We want to learn from you and share what we know. We seek friendship between our species." Lyra nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Friendship, that is rare. Many visitors arrive with requests, demands, or curiosity that harms the balance of this world. Why should we trust humans?" Ethan looked around at his team. They had all faced danger, challenges, and unknown worlds together. He realized that honesty was their strongest tool. "Because," he said, steadying his voice, "we are willing to listen and learn. We may not be perfect, but we value life, beauty, and truth. We want to share these things, not take them." The Queen leaned back, considering his words. For the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of admiration, or at least intrigue, in her eyes. The alien court murmured softly among themselves, noting the unusual bravery of this human who struggled with words yet spoke from the heart. And in that moment, as Ethan met her gaze, he understood something profound. The meeting wasn't just about diplomacy or politics. It was about connection, between two species, two worlds, and perhaps two hearts. Lyra finally spoke, her voice warm. "Very well, humans. Let us begin. Show us your world. Tell us of your stories. Perhaps in time, we will understand each other." Ethan bowed deeply, relief flooding him. The first contact had been made, and while words had failed him at first, honesty and sincerity had bridged the distance. As he glanced at Queen Lyra, he felt a spark of curiosity and respect that went beyond duty, a spark that promised more adventures, more discoveries, and maybe more awkward, wonderful moments like this. The hall filled with soft light as the humans and Alorians began their first dialogue, and somewhere, deep inside, Ethan smiled, realizing that sometimes even the most beautiful beings could blush from shame, and that made them all the more real. The morning sun bathed the Alorian city in golden light, making the crystal tower sparkle like 1,000 tiny stars. Commander Ethan Cross and his team were led through the city by a young Alorian named Taryn, whose shimmering skin reflected the sunlight with every movement. Ethan tried to keep his nerves under control, but every step on this alien world reminded him how different everything was here. "So, what's first on the schedule?" Ethan asked, his voice carefully polite. He noticed how humans were moving in awkward mechanical steps compared to the fluid grace of their alien hosts. Taryn smiled. "You will observe the daily rituals of our people, and you will join us in learning the ways of the court. It is important that you understand Alorian culture." Ethan nodded, though his stomach tightened. Learning a completely new culture sounded simple in theory, but in practice he already knew that humans often struggled to blend in. The humans followed Taryn into a large courtyard where the citizens of Aloria gathered. Their movements were synchronized in a way that seemed almost choreographed. They greeted each other with subtle gestures of their arms and tilts of the head. Ethan tried to copy the gestures, but every attempt looked clumsy and exaggerated. Mira nudged him, whispering, "You're making it worse." Ethan sighed. I know. They reached the center of the courtyard, where a fountain of glowing water shimmered in the air. Citizens danced lightly around it, leaving trails of sparkling particles with their movements. Ethan couldn't help staring. This was unlike anything he had ever seen. Even the air seemed alive with beauty. Suddenly, a group of children approached, curious about the newcomers. One of them reached out toward Ethan, smiling brightly. Instinctively, Ethan knelt down and extended his hand. The child's fingers glimmered as they touched his palm, and Ethan felt a tingling warmth that he had never experienced before. "See? They are welcoming," Taryn said softly. "Do not be afraid of their appearance or their ways. They are Kind. Ethan smiled, though still feeling slightly embarrassed by his awkward movements. The child giggled and ran off, leaving Ethan with a feeling of lightness he hadn't expected. Later, the humans were invited into the court of lessons, a vast chamber filled with floating holographic images. Each image depicted an aspect of Elorian, history, culture, or philosophy. Ethan stepped forward to examine one showing an ancient Elorian ceremony. "Why do they do this?" asked one of the human scientists, Dr. Lila Jensen, pointing at the display. Taryn explained patiently, "It is a ceremony to honor harmony between individuals and nature. Every gesture has meaning. Every movement conveys respect." Ethan tried to mimic one of the gestures, but he ended up knocking over a small floating crystal. The crystal bounced lightly, spinning in the air before landing safely on a pedestal. A few Elorians gasped. Ethan froze, unsure if he had insulted them. Queen Lyra appeared silently at the far side of the chamber, observing. Her face was calm, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. She stepped closer, and Ethan felt his throat tighten once again. His admiration for her had only grown sin. The next morning, Commander Ethan Cross woke to the soft glow of Eloria's twin suns. Light poured through the crystalline walls of the human quarters, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. Ethan rubbed his eyes, still adjusting to the alien world. Today, he knew, would be another challenge, learning the subtleties of Elorian communication. Lieutenant Mira was already up, practicing hand gestures she had observed the day before. "Commander, you need to hurry. Queen Lyra is expecting us in the Court of Harmony," she said with a grin. She had quickly adapted to the Elorian customs, while Ethan's movements still looked stiff, almost comical. Ethan sighed. "I'm trying," he muttered, tying his hair back. "I just don't want to make another fool of myself." Taryn, their young Elorian guide, arrived to escort them. "Do not worry, Commander. Perfection is not required. Only sincerity matters. The Queen can see your heart, even if your gestures falter." Ethan nodded, taking comfort in the reminder. Yet the butterflies in his stomach would not calm. The Court of Harmony was a large circular room, filled with soft floating lights and walls that shimmered with flowing images of Eloria's history. At the center, Queen Lyra awaited. She was seated gracefully on a raised platform, her posture elegant, yet approachable. Her silver hair reflected the morning light, and her glowing eyes seemed to shine with curiosity and amusement. "Good morning, humans," Lyra greeted them. Her voice was soft and melodic, carrying a warmth that immediately eased Ethan's tension. "Today we will begin lessons in communication, gestures, tone, and the subtle nuances that words cannot capture. Are you ready?" Ethan swallowed, nervously. "Yes, Your Majesty, we are ready to learn." Lyra's faint smile encouraged him. "Very well. Let us begin." The first exercise was simple, conveying emotions without speaking. Lyra demonstrated happiness, sadness, curiosity, and respect using only gestures, posture, and slight shifts in facial expression. Ethan tried to imitate her, but his first attempts looked awkward and exaggerated. The human's limbs felt heavy, compared to the fluidity of Elorian movement. Lyra raised an eyebrow, hiding her faint amusement. "Commander Cross, your effort is bold," she said, her voice carefully polite. "But boldness is not the same as clarity." Ethan blushed. I'll try harder," he said. Taryn stepped forward, gently guiding Ethan's arms and posture. "Feel the motion, Commander. Do not think too much. Let it flow naturally." Ethan focused, letting his body mimic hers. Slowly he began to move more gracefully, though still far from perfect. He noticed that Lyra's eyes seemed to linger on him longer than necessary, observing each adjustment. The subtle warmth of her gaze made him conscious of every gesture. Next, they moved to the tones of sound. Elorians could convey emotion not just through words, but through small modulations in voice. Lyra demonstrated how a slight rise or fall, a soft inflection, could change the meaning entirely. Ethan practiced, stumbling over the subtle differences. When he mispronounced or emphasized a sound incorrectly, Lyra's lips twitched with suppressed amusement, and he felt another flush rise to his cheeks. "Commander Cross, humans are Charming in their attempts, Lyra said lightly. Your persistence is admirable. Ethan tried to bow but almost tripped, catching himself awkwardly. Mira and Taryn stifled laughter. Ethan groaned, wishing he could disappear. Yet, the Queen's soft words soothed him. He realized that honesty combined with effort mattered far more than flawless execution. The final exercise of the morning was a shared story. Each human was to tell a short tale, expressing it through gestures, tone, and emotion. Ethan hesitated. Words had failed him in front of Lyra before, and he feared embarrassment again. Yet he remembered Taryn's advice. Sincerity was key. Ethan took a deep breath and began. He told a story of a small human child who had rescued a lost animal, emphasizing bravery, kindness, and curiosity. His gestures were still clumsy, his tones imperfect, yet he spoke with heart. Lyra watched him closely, her expression unreadable. When he finished, a hush filled the room. Then slowly Lyra's lips curved into a warm smile. You humans have a way of speaking that transcends perfection. You convey truth, courage, and heart that is rare and beautiful. Ethan felt his chest tighten. Her words were sincere, and the faint blush coloring her cheeks was unmistakable. It made her seem even more real, more approachable, and, in some strange way, more human. Throughout the afternoon, Ethan continued practicing. He stumbled, he blushed, he laughed at his own mistakes, but he also improved. He learned to let gestures flow naturally, to use tone to convey subtle meanings, and to trust that sincerity would always be understood. Lyra occasionally guided him, her hands lightly adjusting his posture, her soft instructions blending encouragement with humor. Ethan found that even small interactions, like matching her hand movements or following her gaze, built a strange but comforting connection. Each lesson ended with a quiet moment where their eyes met, and Ethan felt a sense of trust, forming that went beyond words. By the end of the day, the humans had learned enough to perform a simple greeting correctly, combining gestures, tone, and respect. Ethan's attempt was still imperfect, but it carried sincerity. Lyra nodded approvingly. You have progressed more than expected, she said, her voice gentle. Your people's honesty and determination are admirable. Continue, and you may learn more than even I can teach. Ethan bowed, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. For the first time since arriving on Aloria, he felt that he could bridge the gap between human and Alorian ways, and as he looked at Lyra, he realized that the lessons were not just about communication, they were about understanding, trust, and connection. That evening, as the humans returned to their quarters, Ethan reflected on the day. He had stumbled, embarrassed himself, and struggled, yet he had learned something far more important than etiquette. Sincerity, courage, and effort were stronger than perfection. And somewhere deep inside he smiled, knowing that his awkwardness had not only been forgiven but had built a bridge between two very different worlds. Lyra, observing quietly from afar, allowed herself a small, private smile. The human's heart was genuine, and somehow, that honesty had caused the Queen herself to feel something she had not expected: warmth, admiration, and a flutter of shyness that even she could not fully hide. For Ethan, the lessons had only just begun, but for the first time, he felt confident that he could meet the challenges ahead, with courage, sincerity, and a little human awkwardness. And perhaps, just perhaps, he could also understand the gentle heart of the Queen, who had once blushed from his silent admiration. The day began with calm skies and the usual shimmering beauty of Aloria. Twin suns painted the land with soft gold, and the rivers glowed gently as they flowed through the valleys. Commander Ethan Cross had just finished another lesson in Alorian gestures when the peace was suddenly broken. The ground beneath the Court of Harmony trembled. At first it was a faint vibration, but soon the walls of crystal shivered with sharp cracks of sound. The floating lights in the chamber flickered, dimming in and out like failing stars. What is happening? Mira asked, steadying herself. Against the wall, Taryn's face went pale. The ground shift. It is rare, but when it happens, it can bring destruction. Before Ethan could respond, Queen Lyra appeared with her attendants. Her expression was calm, but her eyes carried a shadow of worry. A rupture has opened in the southern valley, she said quickly. The energy flows of the planet are unstable. If we do not act, villages will be destroyed. Ethan's heart pounded. What can we do to help? Lyra studied him for a moment, her silver hair shimmering as the chamber shook again. Our people know the ways of harmony, but we do not have the machines to stabilize the valley. You humans, your technology may be what we need. Ethan nodded without hesitation. Then we'll work together. Tell us what you need. Within the hour, Ethan and his team were aboard their ship, flying over the valley with Lyra and her closest advisors. The view from above was breathtaking and terrifying. Cracks glowed with strange energy, spreading like fiery veins across the ground. The floating rivers had begun to twist unnaturally, spilling their glowing waters into nearby forests. Lyra's voice was steady as she pointed. The rupture grows from the central ridge. If it widens, the flow will reach the city within hours. Ethan turned to Mira. Prepare the seismic stabilizers. We'll need them set in place quickly. Mira nodded and rushed to the storage bay. The humans' machines, though small, were designed to study and stabilize unstable terrain. It was risky, but it was their best chance. The ship landed on a ridge close to the glowing cracks. Heat and energy pulsed from the ground like waves. The Aelorians moved with grace despite the danger, while the humans struggled with the heavy equipment. Ethan led the effort, his voice firm and steady despite the chaos. Place the stabilizers here, here, and here, he shouted, marking spots on the ridge. We need to form a triangle around the rupture. Lyra moved beside him, her robe fluttering in the hot wind. The ground will not hold if you place them there. You must adjust for the energy currents. Watch. She knelt, touching the ground. Glowing lines appeared, revealing the hidden flows beneath the surface. Ethan stared in awe. You can see the currents? Lyra nodded. Yes. Our people feel the harmony of the world, but only your machines can hold it in place. Ethan quicks. The valley was calm again. The glowing rivers flowed gently. The cracks had sealed and the threat was gone. But for Commander Ethan Cross, the memory of the crisis lingered. He could still feel the weight of the stabilizer in his hands, the heat of the rupture, and the surprising strength of Queen Lyra beside him. That night, a celebration filled the Aelorian city. Crystalline towers sparkled with bright lights and floating lanterns drifted across the sky like tiny stars. Music rose from the courtyards, soft, flowing melodies that carried both joy and relief. Humans and Aelorians sat together, sharing food and stories, no longer separated by fear or formality. Ethan sat at a long table with his team and several Aelorian citizens. Mira laughed as she tried another glowing fruit which popped in her mouth with a flash of light. Dr. Lila was deep in conversation with an Aelorian scholar about the harmony between energy flows and nature. Ethan, however, found his gaze wandering, again and again toward Lyra. The queen moved gracefully among her people, speaking to them with kindness and calm. Yet, whenever her eyes met Ethan's across the courtyard, she paused for a heartbeat longer than expected. Her expression was soft, almost shy, before she turned back to her duties. Ethan felt warmth in his chest each time it happened. Later, Lyra approached Ethan directly. She held a small crystal cup filled with shimmering liquid. Commander Cross, she said gently, I wish to thank you again. Without your courage and your machines, the valley would have been lost. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't just me. My team worked hard and your guidance made the difference. We couldn't have done it without you. Lyra lowered her gaze, a faint blush touching her cheeks. Still, you risked yourself when others might have stepped back. That honesty of action, it is rare. Ethan smiled awkwardly. It's just the human way. We act first when something matters. Sometimes clumsy, sometimes brave, but always trying. Lyra studied him for a long moment, then sat beside him. The Queen of Aeloria, sitting among humans without her attendants, caused murmurs across the courtyard. But Lyra ignored them. "Tell me more of your world, Commander. Tell me of Earth." Ethan began describing Earth's forests, oceans, and skies. He spoke of snow that blanketed mountains, deserts that stretched endlessly, and the strange beauty of rain falling on city streets at night. The humans nearby added their own memories, festivals, music, the laughter of children, and the endless curiosity that drove them into the stars. Lyra listened intently, her eyes shining. "Your world. It is imperfect yet alive. I can hear the love you carry for it in your voice. That love is what makes you human." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "And your world. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Not just because of the rivers or towers, but because of the way your people live in harmony. It's something we could learn from." Lyra's cheeks warmed again, though she smiled softly. "Your words honor us. And yet, when you speak, I feel something else. Something deeper." Ethan hesitated, searching for words. But before he could answer, Mira called from across the table, waving a glowing fruit. "Commander, you need to try this before it melts." The moment broke with laughter, and Lyra's blush deepened as she stood, her composure returning. Yet the look she gave Ethan before walking away carried a quiet message. Something unspoken, but understood. Over the following days, trust between humans and Aelorians grew stronger. Joint teams studied the repaired valley, combining human machines with Aelorian knowledge. Citizens who once watched the humans with suspicion now greeted them with smiles. Children ran through the streets laughing as they mimicked human speech and gestures. Ethan noticed the change everywhere. The gap between their species was shrinking, replaced by respect and curiosity. And at the center of it all was Lyra. 1. Afternoon, Lyra invited Ethan and his team to the Garden of Harmony, a sacred place where glowing plants grew beneath crystal domes. The air shimmered with soft energy, and a calm silence filled the space. "This garden," Lyra explained, "is where our people come to remember balance. It is said the plants here respond to truth in the heart." She handed Ethan a small seed that glowed faintly. "Place it in the soil. If your spirit is honest, it will grow." Ethan knelt and placed the seed carefully. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a small vine sprouted, curling upward and glowing gently. The humans gasped in surprise while the Aelorians watched in quiet respect. Lyra's lips curved into a smile, her eyes lingering on Ethan. "Your heart speaks clearly, Commander. The garden has accepted you." Ethan felt his face warm, though he tried to keep his composure. "I guess honesty really is the only thing I have." Lyra laughed softly, and even her attendants seemed surprised to see her so open. "And that honesty is more powerful than you realize." That evening, as the sun set and lanterns rose into the sky again, Ethan and Lyra walked together at the edge of the garden. For once there were no attendants, no humans, no lessons, only the quiet hum of glowing plants around them. "You have changed the way my people see humans," Lyra said quietly. "At first, they thought you clumsy and strange. Now, they see courage, sincerity, and humor. They see friends." Ethan looked at her, the soft light of the plants reflecting in her silver hair. "And what do you see, Lyra?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Lyra paused, her cheeks turning faint pink. She met his gaze and whispered, "I see someone who speaks without perfect words but with perfect honesty. And that is beautiful." Ethan's heart raced. He wanted to answer, to tell her everything he felt in that moment, but his voice caught in his throat, just like the first day they met. He smiled instead, and somehow, that was enough. Lyra lowered her eyes, her blush deepening, but a soft smile stayed on her lips. For both of them, the silence carried more meaning than words ever could. The bond between humans and Aelorians was no longer just an alliance. It was friendship, trust, and the beginning of something greater. Ethan knew challenges still lay ahead, but for the first time he felt certain they would face them together. And as the lanterns drifted higher into the Elorian night, Ethan realized something else. Sometimes the simplest words, or even the lack of them, could touch a heart more deeply than any speech. The great hall of Eloria shone brighter than ever before. Thousands of crystal lanterns hung in the air, floating softly, their glow filling every corner. At the center of the hall stood Queen Lyra, her silver hair glowing beneath the lights. Beside her, for the first time in Aelorian history, stood a human, Commander Ethan Cross. The hall was filled with both Elorians and humans. The two peoples had come together to celebrate what no one thought possible, an alliance not of necessity, but of trust and friendship. The air itself felt alive, carrying the whispers of a future that seemed brighter than anyone could imagine. Lyra raised her hand, and the room grew silent. Her voice, calm yet powerful, echoed across the crystal walls. "Today," she said, "we stand not as strangers but as companions. Once our people saw humans as reckless, loud, and uncertain, but you have shown us courage, kindness, and a strength of spirit that we cannot ignore. You have reminded us of the value of honesty and the power of imperfection." Her eyes shifted toward Ethan, and for a heartbeat her regal composure softened. "For this," she continued, "we invite humanity not as visitors, but as friends of Eloria. Our home will be open to you. Together, we will learn, grow, and protect one another. This is the start of something greater than either of us could ever achieve alone." The hall erupted in cheers. Elorians struck their crystal staffs against the floor, creating a ringing harmony, while humans clapped and shouted with joy. The sound rose like thunder, filling the great chamber. Ethan stood silently, letting the cheers wash over him. His chest tightened with pride. He thought of Earth, of the people back home who had dreamed of meeting intelligent life among the stars. He wished they could see this moment, the birth of a bond no one had dared hope for. When the noise settled, Lyra turned toward Ethan. "Commander Cross, will you speak?" Ethan blinked. He had not expected this. His palms grew sweaty, his throat dry. He glanced at Mira, who gave him a thumbs up, and at Dr. Lila, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a breath, he stepped forward. I'm not good with speeches," Ethan began. The hall quieted. Thousands of eyes focused on him. He forced a nervous smile. "But maybe that's okay, because what we've built here wasn't made from perfect words, it was made from trust." He paused, looking around at both species standing side by side. "Humans don't always get things right. We stumble, we argue, we make mistakes, but we keep trying. We keep reaching out, even when we don't know what will happen. And when we reached out to Eloria, you reached back. That's what matters." The hall remained silent, but Ethan could see the effect in their faces. The words were simple, but they carried weight. He turned toward Lyra, and without planning it, said softly, "And sometimes, when we meet someone truly extraordinary, we can't even find the right words at all." Lyra's cheeks warmed with a faint blush, and though she quickly turned back to the audience, the glow in her eyes gave her away. The hall filled with cheers, again louder than before. Ethan let out a breath of relief, smiling awkwardly as Mira laughed and shouted, "Not bad for someone who hates speeches, Commander." That night, celebrations filled the entire city. Music echoed from every street. Glowing banners floated them,